1.3 billion Indians have failed to produce a decent football team. Now, is there something about Indian people which is so biologically different that they're just not good at football? Well, clearly the answer to that is no. Hi, my name's Adam Rutherford, and this is my new book, How to Argue with a Racist, and I'm going to teach you not only how to argue with a racist, but to beat one. I guess when it comes to arguing with people who are actual white supremacists or people who describe themselves as neo-Nazis, there is arguably not that much point in engaging with them, because this is such an ideological position. These people have decided something that is true, and no amount of rational argument or data is going to necessarily persuade them that they are wrong. So in that sense, they're a soft target. I'm less interested in those people. I'm much more interested in, you know, the family members that at Christmas your uncle says something which is a little bit racist. Those people are more interesting to talk to because I don't think they are racist fundamentally. They're just saying racist things, and I think it's really important to try and challenge them. So it's Christmas dinner. Everyone has had a bit to drink. It's family, so you talk in a relaxed way. And your uncle will start saying something which is a little bit racist. Maybe it's often to do with sport. You know, black kids are better at football, which is why you see a disproportionate number of black men in the Premiership or in whatever sport they're looking at. There are tons of preconceptions and myths and stereotypes that many people hold, many people who aren't overt racists, people who are well-intentioned. A lot of them are to do with sport. There's a common misconception that people descended from the enslaved in America, so African Americans, are innately good at explosive sport energy as a result of being selected for musculature and speed during enslavement. That's based on the fact that there hasn't been a white man in the Olympic final since 1980. But the truth is that the sample size that you're basing that myth on is only 58 men. That's the number of people who've competed in that race, which is a terrible sample size to make any judgment for. And then there's another factor on top of that, which is that if it were true, then why are there no black short-distance swimmers? Or why is there a complete absence of African Americans in sprint cycling? None of the numbers in sport actually corroborate or reinforce that notion. And yet, because of one sport, 100 meters or 200 meters, we base a huge mythology on that. I guess it depends on how much everyone has had to drink, but I think that mostly people are interested in these conversations and are interested in history and science. And in my experience, saying, well, you know, that's an interesting observation you've made, but it's not actually true. Or if you point out simple things like, if it were true, why are there no black swimmers? What is there something so different about swimming and running? Is there something so different about these sports which all require explosive energy? Is there something so different about them that we see different traditional groupings of people that we call races segregate in such a way? And the answer is obviously no. I find that quite a powerful argument when you simply point out that 1.3 billion Indians have failed to produce a decent football team. Now, is there something about Indian people which is so biologically different that they're just not good at football? Well, clearly the answer to that is no. And in fact, it works in this country. There are no Premiership Indian or Pakistani footballers, despite that being one of the largest black, Asian, minority ethnic groups in this country. Now, is that biological or is that cultural? Well, you know, I think the answer is pretty obvious. It's cultural, just to make it clear. So when presented with facts like the fact there hasn't been a white man in the 100 meters final since 1980, or like the fact that 144 Nobel Prizes in the sciences have been won by people of Ashkenazi Jewish descent and none by people of African or African American descent, these are facts, but they should represent the beginning of a question rather than the end. If you think that therefore those numbers explain racial differences in, you know, being smart or being fast or whatever the stereotype is, then you're not doing science. And so when faced with those sorts of discussions, I find that open-minded people are willing to take on board sort of numerical, factual answers, that you can actually just take that apart and say, yes, this is a fact, but what are the reasons behind that? A racist will come to the conclusion that those numbers are explained by innate, biological, racially defined characteristics, and therefore ones that are encoded in our DNA. But science doesn't say that. It says that both of those discrepancies, which are stark, but both of them are much better explained by culture, the fact that there is a long-standing tradition of scholarship in Ashkenazi Jewish people, possibly the most advanced form of scholarship that has existed for hundreds of years, or that there is a culture of short distance running in African Americans, and that is a much better explanation for success in those races rather than some sort of fantasized innate racial characteristic. People who hold those sorts of views are not inherently racist. They're probably people who are well-intentioned, and in fact we call this positive attribute racism because, you know, everyone wants to be smarter, or everyone wants to be fitter, or be able to run longer distances or shorter distances over quicker times. But there's two things that are important in challenging those myths. The first is, well, the science says that they're not inherent, they're not based on biology fundamentally, they're much more explicable with understanding culture, understanding our own history. But the second thing is that by believing that there is an innateness to those qualities, it has the effect of separating a group of people out, othering, it's sometimes called. And so you can other Ashkenazi Jewish people and say, well, they are people who are innately, biologically smarter than us. And this is exactly what the Nazis did in the 1920s and 30s, in order to say, well, this is a group of people who are smarter than us, and therefore we can say that they're our enemy because they're potentially more powerful than us. And that is part of the justification of the Holocaust. Similarly, the roots of racism in the 17th and 18th century say very clear things about the hierarchy of the different races. They say that white Europeans are superior to Africans, sub-Saharan Africans. And they qualify that by saying that white Europeans are intelligent and gentle and have logic and rationality in them, whereas sub-Saharan Africans are lazy but strong, and characteristics like this. These are documented examples from the history of race science. And so when we say, well, black people are innately good at sport, we're actually just reinforcing stereotypes that have been around for 400 or 500 years, which are untrue, which are just not true. But these are the things that have been used historically to justify subjugation, to justify separating a people out and saying, these people are innately different from us, and therefore we can subjugate them. That is the basis of colonialism, that is the basis of the age of exploitation, the age of plunder, and the age of empire. Scientists are sometimes reluctant to talk about race, very good at generating data and publishing it, but then we're a breed who are not necessarily predisposed to subsequently talking about the politics that emerges from the experiments that we do. But I think that if you study genetics, human genetics, like I do, then you're effectively talking about ideas to do with human variation, which includes concepts of race. And therefore, I think that we need to be talking about what science actually says about race, and not be reluctant about talking about it, because racists show no such compunction. They will not stop talking about what they think is right, even though it's scientifically illiterate. So I think it's really important that scientists get tooled up and start talking about these things and how science is no ally to racism. Genetics is the study of DNA, which is effectively the study of inheritance and families and sex, and it relates to all aspects of human behavior, which includes our psychology, our behavior, our biology, diseases, our evolution, our history, and pretty much the whole gamut of the human condition. Genetics is the formal science of that, and how our inherent code, the DNA that we carry in our cells, relates to all of those things. But of course, we've been thinking about inheritance for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. And so this is a field which is only really 100 years old in any form, but it's only really matured in the last 10 or 15 years. And it turns out that our understanding of genetics, of inheritance and those types of things has been radically transformed in the last few years as we understand DNA better. But humans have been thinking about inheritance and sex and behavior and populations and race for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And so we carry a lot of cultural baggage with us about how people behave and what people are like, and skin color and countries and boundaries and all those sorts of things. So in some senses, genetics, the formal study of humans, is at odds with what a lot of people think about how humans are and why we are the way we are. So part of my job and part of the purpose of the book is to try and align those things, to try and say, this is what scientists understand about human evolution and the differences and similarities between us. And a lot of our stereotypes and myths are actually untrue because science says something different. In the run-up to publishing this book, a lot of younger people said to me, I wish I had this book at Christmas because I know this conversation is going to happen. I know my dad is going to say something which is a bit racist. And I know that they're wrong, but I don't quite have the scientific toolkit to say why. Well, this is the scientific toolkit. I'm giving you the tools so you can have that conversation with your racist uncle.